Welcome to the Eating at a Meeting podcast. I'm your host, Tracy Stuckrath, dietary needs expert, certified meetings manager, certified food protection manager. I have searched the globe to find people and businesses who are creating safe, sustainable, and inclusive food and beverage experiences for their employees, guests, and communities. In each episode, you will find authentic conversations about how food and beverage impacts inclusion, sustainability, culture, community, health, and wellness. I know that sounds like a lot, but we're going to cover it all. Are you ready to feed engagement, nourish inclusion, and bolster your bottom line? If so, let's go. Hi, and welcome back to another episode of Eating at a Meeting. This is Tracy Stuckrath, your host. I'm with Thrive Meetings and Events, and I educate individuals and organizations worldwide on how to create safe and inclusive food and beverage experiences for their guests, their employees, whoever comes into their lives. On today's show, I'm so excited to have Lianne Mandelbaum from No Nut Traveler. She founded this website and advocacy program in 2013 after a negative flight experience that she encountered with her son. She now has a very thriving blog. She speaks at conferences nationwide, and she does this to encourage individuals with food allergies to share their travel stories, both positively and negatively, to reach out to legislators to help them create policy that helps individuals with food allergies. And she just wants to educate the general public on how it is to live with a food allergy. So, Lianne, thank you so much for being on the podcast with me today.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
You're welcome. So we were chatting a little while ago, too, about what you do. And can you just recap again for me and for the listeners on what that experience was back in 2013?
We were coming back from a family vacation. We were flying home from Denver Airport. There was someone sitting behind me in the departure lounge because the chairs, one faces forward, one faces back. She was behind me. I was telling Josh, my son, who at the time was 8 years old, that he couldn't go into Rocky Mountain Fudge with his older siblings who were going to get a snack because they were making fresh peanut butter fudge. They had like a big sign in the window. And the woman tapped me on the shoulder and she said, "Does your son have a food allergy?" And I said, "Yes, he has an anaphylactic peanut allergy." She said, "Well, we're all going to eat peanuts here. You should move." And I actually appreciated the heads up. We're in the departure lounge. We have the ability to move. I moved all our luggage over to another area, not so far away, but far enough away. And to my dismay, her 3 children followed us, started throwing peanuts up in the air, missing it in their mouths, crushing it under their feet, and trying to kick the dust towards us and pointing at my son and laughing. So I went back over very calmly, was still calm at this point, and I said, "Are you on the Newark bound flight?" And she said she was. So then again, I decided no point in engaging with this person who's not controlling what her children are doing. I went to the United desk because I thought, okay, I got to get the flight attendant on my side. Do you see anyone lighting up a cigarette in an airline these days? No. Why? Because the flight attendant's making an announcement. So that's all I wanted. All I wanted was them to make an announcement that if anyone had peanuts near him, not to open it during the flight, because I didn't want these kids throwing it at him in the air, because it's a very different situation to be on the ground where you can make a choice to walk away. You can't walk away on a plane. So I get to the top of the line and he's standing there with me all cute and smiley. And I said, I just need someone to make an announcement. It's been done for me before, which it had. I usually ask for it when I got on the plane, but I was feeling alarmed with this behavior. So I wanted to make sure it was going to take place. And they came back and they said, "We're going to ask the crew." They came back. They said, "We're sorry, this crew doesn't want to do it." I'm like, "What do you mean?" I'm like, "Why? We don't have to tell you why." I'm like, "Can I speak to them?" "No, you're not allowed to speak to them. It's their decision. It's final. There's nothing you can do about it." And so then I went to the United customer service line and I got to the top of that line and they said, "Well, I'm sorry, ma'am, this isn't a customer service issue." "This isn't a customer service issue. What is a customer service issue?" So I requested a manager and I went up the chain of command at Denver. And the final manager looked at me and he looked at Josh and he said, "Well, if you think he's going to die, just don't get on the plane." at which point my happy-go-lucky 8-year-old who had never worried about his food allergy ever, other than being careful about what he chose to eat and carrying his medication, became hysterical. And he said, I'm only 8. I have my whole life to live. And the man said I could die on the plane. The boys are throwing peanuts at me. Please don't make me get on this plane. And I couldn't get on that plane. When I got home, I decided they hadn't heard the last of me. I actually called FARE, and they said they were very, very busy with getting epinephrine in schools, and they didn't have the manpower at that point to do anything, but they talked me through the steps of filing a DOT complaint. Jen Jobrack was very, very empowering, and she basically gave me the tools I needed to start and said that if something were to come of it, that FARE would join me maybe in the future, and that's exactly what happened. So I did a sketch on my piece of paper when I came home on like a website, what I wanted. And it said that I wanted a place to house testimonials, to collect stories from other families, because a quick Google search had showed me that this was not an outlier. There were families faced far worse situations, reactions in the air, being mocked by flight crew, being told inconsistent information. So there was such a need. So I launched out of the blue, having never done anything like this before.
That's fantastic. So 7 years later, No Nut Traveler, what have you seen? What have you accomplished in the last 7 years from that?
It's definitely on the radar of the general public and airlines in a way that it wasn't. I can't fully take credit for that, but I certainly can take a little bit of credit. People are more aware when flying. I hear in general that it's a friendlier place to be because there's more of an understanding, because there's been more information that's been out there. We've managed to get a lot of press. The reason I started writing, I think we chatted earlier, is I had an altercation with someone on Twitter about making fun of a child with a food allergy flying, and he asked me to write a piece, and I did, and that's where my writing started. But the real reason I kept writing, and I remember writing him a thank you note after he gave me that first opportunity to write for Huffington Post, is that people weren't talking about it. It wasn't out there. And I'm like, okay, so it's not out there. So I'm going to make it out there. I'm going to have to write it. If it's not an important topic and it's not, garnering the attention of people in the media, then let's write about it ourselves. Why not? So that's kind of where that started. And I think that has increased empathy and also encouraged other people to write about it. So the New York Times has written several stories. They've interviewed me, but I've also referred them to other people when it need be. It's definitely been put on the radar of more people, and that has led to greater empathy and understanding. There's still a lot of work to be done because there's no formal policies, and so what we see is consistent inconsistency. So you can fly one airline one day and then the next day fly with a different crew and have a completely different experience, and that needs to change. And there needs to be emergency medication that's easy to use on all planes.
So in the perfect world, utopia, what would that policy be?
Well, the policy would be that no matter what food allergy you have, you'd be able to write it down somewhere in the booking process. So there are airlines like, say, JetBlue and Delta that allow you to check off that you have a nut allergy, but why only nut allergies?
Right.
If you have a different anaphylactic, life-threatening allergy, you need to be able to inform the airline. It's ridiculous that you can't. So I would like that. And then once informed, I would like the airline to have some sort of policy on what they're going to do. Like, for example, JetBlue has a buffer zone in front and behind where they won't serve that. Now, that might not be okay for everybody. For the majority of people, they can fly like that. So, I also think there needs, in a utopia, so you're giving me perfect, if there's someone who has had a previous severe reaction to what they think is airborne, then I think that person should have the right to at least ask for different accommodations than the person who most likely only if they eat it, which is the most likely scenario, is if you eat the food, you will go into anaphylaxis. But eating the food could be inadvertent. So the person before you leaves a trace, you don't clean your tray, or you don't get on early enough to clean your tray, or you miss a spot and you inadvertently rub an eye or whatever it is, you know, there are reasons for the buffer zone that go way behind. It's not necessarily scientific, but practical. It just makes sense to me. So I just think there needs to be some sort of standard policy on what airlines will do. It's very hard to say what that policy would be, even in a utopia, because there's such a range in reactions, and every reaction is different. So it's a hard question, but I think in my utopia, every airline would have easy to use auto injectors and staff training on anaphylaxis. And I believe it's not even about having the auto injector, but about the training, because if the flight attendants are trained to use it, then maybe they don't want to use it. So maybe then they try to keep that passenger safe. Right. And they have their back. So there's so many reasons to have the auto injector, and it is the right medication, and we are in the 21st century and we have the right tools. We're not doing CPR on someone on a plane. We're using a defibrillator when necessary. Why? Because we have access to the technology and it's available. It's the same thing. Why do we have these vials that may or may not be on planes, which is another conversation, but why is that the requirement? Then the epinephrine auto injector, which my son, when he was 5, taught his kindergarten class how to save him in show and tell. Right. I mean,
and I've seen stories too that the vials weren't even labeled when they were in.
No, they're not labeled.
Kits.
They're not labeled, and the cardiac concentration is very different, and you need to be able to titrate it down. And I mean, it's beyond my expertise, but look at Dr. Mike, who saved a patient midair and only found the cardiac concentration. And it's just lucky that on the fly he knew what to do. You know, and he talked about that being such a close call. And now he's an advocate for putting these auto injectors on planes because of the harrowing experience he had. And there've been so many near misses.
Yeah. What does safe and inclusive food, what does a safe and inclusive airline experience look like to you as it relates to food allergies?
I don't. That's a hard question, because for the most part, I tell people not to take any food, even if it's labeled safe by an airline. And I will go by that. Like, you should not, even if, when we flew from South Africa home, they had my son's peanut allergy in all the records. And several times they came to me with a sealed meal that said peanut allergy on it with his name. I still didn't let him have it, because up in the air is not the time to find out the caterer made a mistake. There's been a recall. It's really nice that they went out of their way to do that. What I do think is safe and inclusive is including products like, I'm just going to throw it out, I have no affiliation with the company, but if you look at a product like Made Good, which is free of a lot of allergens, it is on a couple of airlines. And 88 Acres, I believe, is also now on several airlines. When you look at those kind of companies, and that's sealed in a package, like that, I would let him have on a plane. JetBlue used to serve Skeeter snacks, which is now Safe and Fair. I mean, that I used to let him have on the plane. And there is a sort of joy when you get to have a snack like everybody else. But that's not, I always try to tell people that flying's not about the dining experience. So you don't want to focus in on it. However, it is nice to have those inclusive snacks, because sometimes the plane is delayed. Sometimes, you run out. It's nice to have that backup. And it is nice to have something that can accommodate a wide variety of dietary preferences, intolerances, and food allergies. I think that's forward thinking of an airline. We're living in an era where people are developing more of these allergies. I just think, why not? It's a customer based, you want to serve your customers. So why not have something? And a lot of times those products are actually healthier. Not always, but people are looking to be more healthy.
Yep. And it goes back to your customer service and, statement. This is not customer service issue. Yeah. It is a customer service issue. Because people, and when you look at your Twitter feed and your blog posts too, I'm like, people will choose, and it's not just yours, but it's all other food allergic websites too. It's like, we will choose to use the product and go use the hotel or the airport or the airline that treats us well and includes us. My son is a nationally ranked tennis player, my food allergic one. And we used to, at some point, we went down to Florida to play in various camps. And the airline
out of Newark, we didn't like that flew directly to where the camp was. We drove to LaGuardia, which is an hour away. Pain in the butt for us to fly JetBlue because they flew directly to our destination and they were so good with his food allergy. Again, he was supposed to be in a national tournament, which got canceled because of COVID, but we had a choice between two airlines and JetBlue was at a far more inconvenient time. Like, it was just early in the morning, pain in the butt. The United flight was just so perfect. And we looked at the two flights and my husband's like, risk reward. Why would we go to the flight where United's been better? They're much better than when I flew them that one time, but they're still so inconsistent where JetBlue has that policy. At least they have a policy. They have your back. So that's what we chose. We didn't go for convenience.
Right.
We're not the families looking on Expedia for necessarily. Not that finance is not an issue for people. I'm not saying that at all, but it's not the primary issue. There's so many other factors. And so airlines would see a loyal and repeat customer. And how do airlines run, or any other business? You run on repeat business, right? But there's so many choices in the Expedia world, the kayak world, whatever world you're looking at to see how many places you can get to with this airline. I mean, how many customers can say that they're going to choose based upon a food allergy? I mean, I can say we're going to, when we went to look to fly to South Africa, by far the most luxurious, cheapest, and best route was on Emirates. And they're supposed to have this magnificent, flight crew and attentiveness. And what do I remember? Two boys being told to sit in the toilet for half of their flight because they had a peanut allergy. It doesn't matter how good their price is, how great their customer service is, or how convenient. We took a much more inconvenient route on South African Airways. And guess what? We had a fabulous experience and didn't have to worry about the allergy over the ocean for all those hours. Well, that's why we chose them. So when you look at customers coming back, I would fly them again and again and not choose the airline that is rude.
That's such a good point. And, with what you do on the airlines, and I'm a meeting planner, and I've been advocating for this on the front end in meetings, but this is a big issue with corporate travel too, because employees who have food allergies and things like that, I mean, how are we tracking that information about those employees with food allergies? Is whoever's booking that ticket for them, are they looking at that information for them? Because that to me is a whole nother level of, is it workers' comp? In the UK, there's it's the Homicide Act. And, that if somebody's traveling for work and they get harmed or die, the company's liable for that person's death. And so it plays into a whole nother level of travel. You mentioned not traveling for COVID-19. And I think, not very many people are flying right now, but it's
probably safe. The saddest part is for food allergic passengers. Now is probably the safest as far as allergies are concerned to travel because they are actually cleaning the planes. Yeah. I mean, I have pictures from followers, the garbage, they're not cleaning the planes. I mean, you just know. When I used to get on to pre-board on an airline that didn't serve peanuts. So one of the reasons we chose JetBlue, besides the fact that we can self-identify, check off the nut allergy, pre-board the plane and have the buffer zone, right? They actually don't serve peanuts. So that's a big bonus for me and very lucky that my son only has the one allergen. He's outgrown multiple allergens. I've gotten on so many times and I'm sitting there wiping and, there are other people that have pre-boarded for various reasons and they look at my cloth being black and they're like, can I have one? And then I'll sit there and I'll pick up peanuts all over the floor of a plane that doesn't even serve them. So you can't have a false sense of security there because an airline doesn't serve your allergen that somebody wasn't there before eating it. Right. Now they're cleaning the planes in between. So probably, not only are they getting rid of the germs, they're getting rid of the allergens. Mm-hmm. Why weren't they cleaning the planes in the first place? We could have a whole discussion about that. But it's so sad that this would be the safest time for us to travel from an allergy perspective. But I'm hoping that when this crisis abates and people go back to flying and travel, that the airlines continue cleaning the planes to assure people that, and that throws, they're not going to be doing it for us as food allergy consumers, but it is an added bonus for us that this is going on, because all those measures of deep cleaning that you have, not that you still wouldn't go down and wipe your tray, but it's going to be a much cleaner world, I think. And I'm hoping too, the fact that people are so worried about, with good reason, about catching this virus while being in the air. Well, that's how, I'm not comparing, it's not apples to apples, but we are worried about those traces of allergens being there. We're not making this up or being hysterical, whether as an adult or as a parent. These are real concerns, and it is frightening sometimes to fly, especially if, as I told you earlier, it wasn't on, especially if say you're going to go to a funeral or visit an ailing parent, grandparent, friend, and you have to choose that airline that's going to get you there on time. And it's the airline that either serves your allergen, has no policy. Sometimes it's scary when you talk to people that have done that. They have flown with masks and bandanas and been afraid to breathe the whole time. That shouldn't be for any human being. If you tell a flight crew that you're deathly allergic, they should not serve everyone on the plane your allergen. I don't care what allergen it is and what airline it is. That is just basic human decency. Why would you do that? Even if they're not going to go into anaphylaxis, which is the argument people say, you have to ingest. Well, even if you're going to be covered in full body hives for an entire flight and are scared, is that okay?
Right.
Why can't you just give up the food? When did food become more important than a person's mental and physical well-being? I that's the part that still stumps me time and time again. I just don't understand what happened to basic human decency and compassion. And I'm hoping that this, if there's any good to come out of this for food allergy flyers and flyers in general, is just a greater sense of compassion and empathy to our concerns and fears. Not that they're the same, but there are some parallels that can be.
Wholeheartedly. And I've gotten a couple of emails from Delta, because I am tried and true Delta flyer. And, they're changing some right now, at least they're looking at their food and beverage and how they serve it. And, the single serve bottles of water and things like that. But I'm hoping, and I need to somehow, maybe with your help, let's look at what you're serving in general. And anyways, because I do mark off that I, need a gluten-free meal when I'm to the point of traveling internationally or something like that. But sometimes I get upgraded to first class, and they automatically put, they give you 2 offerings, but they don't list what's in the food.
We need to work on that. We need to work on ingredient disclosure. Why do we have to, why is it buyer beware, especially in the air? And
exactly.
We don't know what loopholes exist either. I've been trying. It's different people are in charge of the catering, and then the different agencies in the government oversee the catering. And at what point, is cross-contamination going on? Do you have to even label for it? Because you don't have to label for it on the ground in the United States. It's purely voluntary. So, there's so many questions that could easily be answered just with the truth and transparency.
Yeah. Well, and even on a flight that I took to Japan, I had the luxury of my client paying me business class, and I bring my bags of food, and I brought my bag of nuts because that's what I eat, because I'm not allergic to nuts. But if you ask for a special plate on the flight, the flight attendants actually know what's being served as the regular meals. They don't necessarily know the ingredients, but they know that there's going to be chicken and green beans and mashed potatoes, right? But on a special plate, it just says Tracy, gluten-free, dairy-free. And it doesn't tell you anything else. And how do I know what else is in that, especially if you have multiple allergies? And so I think working on that labeling aspect is just as important, as well as helping people who do have food allergies.
There's so many people that I have collected testimonials. I remember someone was, I think it was Delta, who does have a great policy, by the way.
They do.
It can happen on any airline. They gave them a piece of chocolate cake they said was not free, and they went into anaphylaxis. Now, I would tell you never to have a dessert even on the ground. I'm very fearful of where we choose to allow my son to have dessert. And I would have a very specific discussion with the chef on like where the chocolate was sourced, as far as cross-contamination. But people do accept meals, and these reactions are going to happen. And if you don't really have the ingredients, then you may have an emergency on your hands that you don't want to deal with, and we don't stock the planes with the right medication. So step one would be having the labeling, right? Because then that person would be like, wait a minute, there are crushed walnuts in here. I shouldn't be having this. Now, again, I told you, I think people shouldn't be having those kind of choices on a plane anyway. You could take a sealed snack of like one of the top 8 or nut-free cookie, pastry, whatever. That's the only thing I would let my child have on a plane coming from an airline staff member. But, if they had the correct label in the first place, they wouldn't have the need for the medication. So it does start with the labeling. It does,
It does, yeah.
So, and there's so many people, no matter, you talk, I talk, Allergic Living talks, the advocacy groups talk about, not necessarily taking food on a plane or knowing your ingredients, but so many people out of the 32 million in America, they don't.
Right.
That's why they have experiences like the person with the chocolate cake. So you do have to be, yes, there is personal responsibility, but if you haven't been educated, and many people don't see a board certified allergist, and many people I've met don't know how to read a label, right? So or don't even know to read the label, and don't understand that the label doesn't have to include what your allergen, what's going on with the surfaces where your allergen is being prepared. So as airline staff members, as airline companies, it would behoove you to have that labeling clear so that you don't have these emergencies in the air. Yes, I do want people to have the medication, and it's really important, but why not stop it at the source?
Exactly.
So I think there's an opportunity there. And also, like you said, you need a gluten-free meal. Well, there's lots of people who need gluten-free meals or dairy-free meals. Some for, but we need to make sure that they're safe and they're labeled appropriately. And, there are people that can accept that meal up in the air or do accept it. And you better make sure that it's not, going to be their last bite or create an emergency landing, which is no fun for anybody on the plane. So, everything we're talking about here makes good business sense. You create a loyal customer base. You create a built-in customer base. You've got people who will repeat, come fly you again and again and again and again. Where else we are like such a valuable consumer group. We don't see it in ourselves, and we don't tout it enough, but we're valuable because everybody else is, again, doing searches or whatnot. We're coming back and back again for the airlines that treat us correctly with respect, that do offer things that, that make us feel safe and comfortable.
All right. What is your favorite food and why?
Guacamole and chips, because it just tastes so good. I mean, I like all Mexican food, but it just is a happy food for me. I love avocados. So I could put avocados on anything. And I love cilantro.
I do too. So, it doesn't make your mouth taste.
No, there's that gene, right? People love cilantro. Like one of my children thinks cilantro tastes like soap, my daughter.
Yep.
And then my food allergy child is 14. He's like me. He's like, how much more cilantro can we put in the guacamole? So...
Okay, and then where can everyone find you?
I thought you could say, where can I find my guacamole? And I was going to actually give a shout out for Rosa Mexicana, who's so fabulous.
They're so good. Yeah, and they're so good.
I went there when I was speaking in Washington, D.C., and I was at a conference, and Allie Bond and Gwen Smith. So Gwen Smith is the editor and owner of Allergic Living e-magazine, and Allie is Miss Allergic Reactor. She's got multiple food allergies. I mean, a list that's just... so long I can't remember it. And the management of Rosa Mexicana was so phenomenal. And then he started telling us that his mother had a food. It just what a difference. So we will choose to go to Rosa Mexicana. We've had the same experience in New York. We've had the same experience in New Jersey. So I love guacamole, but my food allergy son loves guacamole too. And, they do the tableside guacamole there.
Yes, it's very good.
I don't know. That's it. So people can find me at nonuttraveler.com. That's where I am. You can also just Google search my name, Lianne Mandelbaum, and then you can see the various publications I've written for. And lots of fun airline articles will pop up. And You can
Thank
also
you
go to
for
No Nut Traveler
everything.
Facebook or Instagram or Twitter at No Nut Traveler.
No Nut Traveler. Okay. Thank you so much for everything that you do.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Eating at a Meeting podcast, where every meal matters. I'm Tracy Stuckrath, your food and beverage inclusion expert. Call me and let's get started right now on creating safe and inclusive food and beverage experiences for your customers, your employees, and your communities. Share the podcast with your friends and colleagues at our Eating at a Meeting Facebook page and on all podcast platforms. To learn more about me and receive valuable information, go to tracystuckrath.com. And if you'd like more information on how to feed engagement, nourish inclusion, and bolster your bottom line, then visit eatingatameeting.com.